let's talk about the Tennessee Titans and them signing DeAndre Hopkins to a 2-year, $26 million deal up to $32 million with incentives. Now, if I'm not mistaken, Riv, I seen some of your tweets on Twitter. I seen that you might be ready to push the Titans agenda that's coming.
Now, I'm happy that we're starting with you, bro.
Here we go.
Wait, what the fuck?
You know why I'm happy?
You caught me off surprise.
I'm happy because last podcast we were here and we were talking about the AFC South. And in the back of my mind, I was like, man, I really wish Riv was here because I know that he just has just a feeling about the Tennessee Titans. And it's a shame that you weren't able to share it. And now, in hindsight, it's a little bit better that you weren't able to do that because we didn't know that DeAndre Hopkins was about to sign with Tennessee. So talk to me. Talk to me, Rivio Foreign, about what you believe that the Tennessee Titans are about to do.
You also didn't get a chance to push your C.J. Stroud agenda, which I know you said the Texans could win 7 games this year.
Yeah. No, I missed some time, man. I told you guys in the car that I'm gonna try to lock in this year and definitely get some agendas out there and definitely just
you got a handful.
Put a more conservative effort.
Listen, bro, the way that I treated the NBA seasons, the way you got to treat this football season.
No, for sure.
You feel me?
Look alive.
We're here. For sure, yeah. But no, I thought the move at first was great because they needed a guy on the outside. They needed a number one. And I was reading some stats that Joel typed out, of course, on Twitter. And then, of course, I was looking up my own stats on, Google. Treylon Burks, he didn't look too great last year, and I think DeAndre Hopkins can help that. And I think he can also help the running game. And there's familiarity in the office. The OC, DeAndre Hopkins was with him before. Mike Vrabel, he's very consistent with him too. And Mike Vrabel, he gets the best out of his guys. So I think that's really important. And plus, money talks. And it was a good amount of money from Tennessee. He probably could have got a little bit less or a little bit more from somewhere else. But the money sticks there. The coaching is there that he's very familiar with in the office. So I think it's good. As long as Ryan Tannehill is healthy, as long as Derrick Henry, the beast, still the best running back in the league, I think to most of us. Maybe you have that Taylor guy at 1. I don't know how you be moving.
Probably CMC right now.
I was going to say CMC.
Well, as long as Derrick Henry is healthy, he's still the best running back in the league.
I respect that opinion.
And then with DeAndre Hopkins, we've seen when he's on the field and he's healthy, he's still one of the 10 best receivers in the world. So as long as you got that, you got Treylon Burks, you got a modest offensive line. Like I told you in the car, I seen some moves they made. It wasn't great, but I had to look them up, see what they was like. It was all right. So they was very calm. So as long as they do that, the defense is there. I think this team can win about 9 to 10 games, maybe. 10 is a high ceiling, but I think this team could get to 9-8. The division is wide open. I like what the Texans is doing over there. I drafted C.J. Stroud in my fantasy.
Yeah, that was a fold.
In the second round. No, it's going to be amazing.
Second round,
it's gonna
fold.
Don't sleep. Don't fucking sleep.
All right.
But I drafted them high. The Texans are going to be good, but I think that division is wide open. I think the Jaguars, as great as they are and as great as they have a stranglehold on the division, Tennessee usually always at one point fights with them or is in battle. They had like 10 less wins
last couple
last
of
year.
seasons it's been the times, but last year, of course,
Vrabel always gets the best out of his guys. So I think DeAndre Hopkins is probably going to have the most impact with this team because I think this team is probably the closest because, like I said, the division is weak. They still have Tannehill. They still have Derrick Henry. So I'm really high on this move for sure.
The Titans are very similar to the Pittsburgh Steelers. Mike Vrabel is very similar to Mike Tomlin. They're both
he's stealing it bar for bar.
They're both
great
head coaches.
Here? No.
Can you say, Joel mentioned this on the last podcast, or you just going to Quentin Miller him?
He just
Bro, you're Quentin Miller like hell.
I'm sorry, I didn't know you had to copyright it. But listen, Mike Vrabel's always going to have this team competing. And I like parity. DeAndre Hopkins going to the Chiefs, going to the Bills. I don't think he would have made the Bills favorites. I think they would have been more dangerous. The Chiefs become favorites with DeAndre Hopkins. Would have loved them in green with the New York Jets. But I like this Titans move because they need more weapons to surround Ryan Tannehill. I feel like people underestimate what Ryan Tannehill can do when he's surrounded by good surrounding parts. In 2019 and 2020, he was playing at a top 10 quarterback level when he had a good offense around him. Now, he is a system quarterback. He's not going to elevate the talent, but he is good when he has that supporting cast around him. And the Titans, for the last couple of seasons, have been losing a lot of pieces. And you mentioned the Jaguars having a stranglehold on the division. I have the Jaguars winning the division, but they don't have a stranglehold on this division anymore. And looking back at it, I don't think they ever did. Last year was the first year they won a division in a while since the Blake Bortles era in 2017. And the Titans, every year with Vrabel, they're 500. Last year, they lost the most games due to injury, and still they were standing firm week 18, facing the Jaguars with Joshua Dobbs starting. Trevor Lawrence had a pretty mediocre game, below average game.
But the Titans blew it It was their division
chance,
to
facts.
win for a good portion of the season. The wheels started to fall off towards the end of the season.
And Josh Dobbs was there, and he gave him a chance. He threw a late game interception that cost them, and that's what happens when you start a backup quarterback in that meaningful of a game. But they were in it. My question with this DeAndre Hopkins move is, does he play the X or the Z flanker receiver role? Mm-hmm. Because I know the Titans want Treylon to be the X, and he has an advantage over D-Hop right now in size, speed, but he's just not somebody that can consistently beat press coverage. And last year, he struggled. I think versus zone, man, and press coverage, his success rates were below the 25th percentile, and receivers that have that low of a success rate typically don't become good starting level receivers. So I'm curious to see where they're going to play D-Hop. I think he's going to play the Z flanker role. Brett Coleman mentioned it on Twitter. And I think it's smart because that way you can move D-Hop around more. And Treylon is going to get those matches where he can threaten the defense deep. But I do want to see improvement from Treylon in Treylon's route running. And I think that's the major key for this offense. But this offense has potential. Derrick Henry's entering his 29-year-old season. Historically, running backs fall off a cliff that year. So I'm going to be looking with a magnifying glass to see whether he's still the same or not. But I like Shige. Treylon has upside. D-Hop's going to maximize this offense. So I think it'll be a respectable offense, enough for this offense to put up points and let their defense hold opponents to less than 20 and maybe win those games. And I think their offensive line isn't that bad either. It's a completely new group. You know, they signed Andre Dillard from the Philadelphia Eagles, who is a starting level tackle. He just never got a chance because of Jordan Mailata. He just came out of nowhere and was a generational tackle. They signed Daniel Brunskill from the 49ers, who's a good starting level guard. And if Peter Skoronski's any good, this offensive line will be average. Mm-hmm. But, you know, I think that this team is still competing for a wild card spot. I do see them in like the 8 to 10 win range. If I were to predict it right now, I think they're going 9-8. I had them at 7 wins the other podcast. But I think adding in D-Hop to this offense, I give them 2 more wins by that.
I'm at 10.
So you don't think, because the last episode we were in agreement that there's a better chance the Jags are the 1 seed than they lose this division. Now you're telling me the Jags never had a stranglehold on the division.
That's what I was going to say. If we're having conversation about offseason, Riv's statement is pretty accurate. A good portion of people believe that this is the Jaguars' division to lose. That's what he means by stranglehold. I understand what he was saying. Of course, previous seasons, this has been the Titans' division for a good amount of time. Jaguars had the number 1 overall pick. I believe it was 2 seasons in a row where they were able to get Trevor Lawrence, and they were able to get thank you very much, Walker last season. But this season, this offseason, all the conversations in the AFC South has been about the Jaguars. But I'm with you. Of course, you can't just simply overlook the Tennessee Titans for the sole fact that Mike Vrabel every single year leaves them at least average to slightly above average. And you mentioned something pretty interesting about slot percentage, playing outside wide. Treylon had 55 snaps in the slot last season. That's basically 21%. A good portion of his snaps were outside wide. He had 209 outside wide, which is almost 79%. DeAndre Hopkins, very similar though, although in 3 seasons, the highest percentage that he played in the slot was this past season at 27.3. That's 106 snaps at the slot. And then out wide, 282, which was 72%. And years prior, which 2021 and 2020 with the Arizona Cardinals, he played outside wide 85% of the time and then 90% of the time. And 90% of the time in 2020 was the only full season that he has had with the Arizona Cardinals.
He had A.J. Green, he had Rondale Moore, then he had Marquise Brown.
Last year.
I was going to say, and no Christian Kirk last year for the first time while he was in Arizona.
He had a lot of
also.
guys.
So we saw him in the slot a little bit more. That's something that I'm looking forward to in Tennessee. How are they going to change the scheme? How are they going to put DeAndre Hopkins in this offense where he's not just solely on the outside, playing more on the inside? You mentioned it. Treylon is going to play a lot on the outside, but I think that it allows a little bit of versatility between the two of them. And I know Joel's going to speak on this a little bit, so I'll go very surface level. I do believe this helps Treylon Burks. Anytime you have an alpha, true number 1 wide receiver, it brings all the attention to them, and it allows Treylon to now have a little bit more space, not face as many double teams. I say double teams because obviously Treylon's not at that talent level. However, when you're the only wide receiver option, that's just naturally what's going to happen. There's the luxury that they have that Derrick Henry also is their running back. So it's going to be a lot of maybe now Derrick Henry benefits too because maybe there won't be as many stacked boxes with threat of DeAndre Hopkins out wide and Treylon Burks, who is an ascending wide receiver. I think Treylon Burks definitely benefits from this. I think Derrick Henry definitely benefits from this because we're not going to be seeing as many stacked boxes, or we, as I say, of course, the Tennessee Titans, they're not going to be seeing as many stacked boxes, and it's just going to allow the offense to be a little bit more free-flowing. I'm going to add a game to max, so I had them around that 7-8 range, 8-9 range now for sure. This is going to be a very, let me not say fun team per se, because I still have concerns about the offensive line. Of course, Skoronski was a very nice addition at the draft, one of the better offensive linemen available, but that's still a concern for me. The secondary is still a very strong concern for me, but this definitely gives this offense a nice jump start that it desperately needed.
I think you could start Hop or Treylon. They could kind of be interchangeable.
I agree.
I'm excited because last season, when we look at both of these receivers, D-Hop last year when he was in Arizona, you have Hollywood and Rondell Moore. Hollywood has showed he could play on the outside, but they're both smaller guys. So you're expecting you're expecting D-Hop to play on the outside. Same thing with Tennessee and Treylon, where he was really their only wide receiver option right last year. They had you had Kyle Phillips, you had Westbrook-Akine, but Treylon was the only kind of alpha type receiver that was there that would command being an X receiver. But now that you have both of them there, I would be excited to see Treylon play more in the slot. He did really well in Arkansas in his college when he was playing there, being able to match up against smaller corners or match up against linebackers to be able to take advantage of that. And Tennessee now has the option to play both these guys. I don't know if it'll really be, Treylon, you're the X 90% of the time, and D-Hop can play in the slot. I do expect them to switch it up depending on their opponent. But it's a big boost to the Titans' offense overall. Last week when we did the football episode, I said this offense is kind of, head and shoulders when it comes to them and the Pittsburgh Steelers. Now they've got D-Hop. Blows them out of the water, right? I don't even think it's that much of a conversation. You have D-Hop, you have Treylon. Gotta take it. And of course you have Derrick Henry there. And if you're just talking about a group of guys with D-Hop, Treylon, Derrick Henry, and Chig at tight end, this is one of the most big physical, you don't want to get in a brawl with these guys. They're ripped, they're strong. You know what I mean? All of that. Yeah. So they're not someone they're gonna be running over you. They can run past you. They're physical. So this really does feel like an on-brand Tennessee Titans type of move to make. And they've put themselves kind of in the sleeper category of the AFC, right? I think before this move, none of us even maybe an outside chance of a playoff spot. Now I think there's a path to a playoff spot, and you always have those teams, especially the first round of the playoffs, where they're looking over the next week. Oh, whoever has that bye, maybe it's KC, maybe it's the Ravens, it's the Bengals. Maybe they're overlooking that Tennessee team, and they can surprise them because, like you guys mentioned, we know Mike Vrabel is going to have these guys ready to play. We know this defense, maybe at the end of the year, they're not in that top 5 type group, but they have those moments like they did against the Chiefs last year where they had Malik Willis starting and they held them to 20 points in overtime, right? So they have moments where they can be an elite group. And I know a lot of people are kind of having this agenda where it's like, oh, Tennessee receivers, that's the place to go where receivers die because we saw Julio do it, right? But if you look back, Julio, his last year in Atlanta, he was banged up. He gets to Tennessee, he was banged up. Last year, DeAndre Hopkins, after coming back from suspension, he had 64 catches, 717 yards, and 3 touchdowns in 9 games. That's a 17-game pace of 119 catches, 1,355 yards, and 6 touchdowns. And that's
came back last year
basically without Kyler. That's with Colt McCoy. Yep. That's with Trace McSorley. Yep. This is with some terrible quarterback play. So just because it happened to Julio, and now you have D-Hop, who's kind of on the back 9 of his career, doesn't mean that he's just going to go there and not be the same receiver. I'm still expecting D-Hop to have a great season. Statistically, maybe it's not there because we know they're going to give the ball to Derrick Henry 30 times a game, and that's kind of what my tweet was about, where maybe this helps Treylon in terms of the stuff Joel's talking about, right? Success against man, zone, press, whatever it might be. But since the Titans throw the ball so infrequently, I would rather have Treylon soaking up all of those targets. Now you have Hopkins, who I'm expecting to have the most amount of targets on this team. So I don't think production-wise he's going to be up to, I don't think he's going to get 1,000 yards. He's going to have that kind of breakout production year. But to Joel's point, hopefully this helps kind of the coverage he sees, and more people are going to be looking at D-Hop. Treylon sees more one-on-one coverage, and he could exploit that.
Well, Dehls. Well, in 2019, so Tim Kelly was the Houston offensive coordinator. D-Hop was there. He had a K. He had the offense. They passed the ball 55.2% of the time in 2019. 2020, 61%. 2020, 56. So I think it does help Derrick Henry in a sense where you don't have to, you can't force feed him 30 times. He's about to be 30. So and this offense needs a healthy balance of pass the ball, run the ball, pass the ball, run. You can't just have Derrick Henry out there riding the team on his back, especially not right now. He's nearing 30. Injuries have been piling up. So I think a healthy infusion of now you have somebody that's connected with DeAndre Hopkins. He can still do it, like you just mentioned, with the numbers. Treylon Burks hopefully makes that jump. You can now infuse a healthy balance of, okay, we're going to give Henry the ball 15 to 20 times a game, but we're going to force feed DeAndre Hopkins and Treylon Burks, and hopefully that gets us going, and then we can start having a balanced offensive attack. And if Ryan Tannehill is healthy, we've seen in those years he can be they were at their best when they had Derrick Henry and they had A.J. Brown as a number one. Ryan Tannehill was having a good statistical season. That's when they were really a dominant team. So if you can have that healthy balance, it helps Ryan Tannehill, but especially Derrick Henry, who you want to keep healthy throughout the season.
So your point about Treylon in the slot. In college, that's all he did.
It was a lot of slot, a lot of screens. He had some stuff in the backfield too.
Which is why in the NFL, when they kind of just threw him out there to be the X, it was alarming because that's not his natural position. And that's why I have question marks around him being that X receiver, because the difference between being an X and a Z, because both receivers play on the outside. The Z is just a flanker.
Yep.
The difference is at the X, you have to stay on the line of scrimmage and you can't go into motion, which means you're going to get more press man at the line of scrimmage. You're not able to be a little bit back off the line versus the flanker. You're able to have that cushion. You're able to go in motion and get mismatches versus the defense. I feel like Treylon needs to be used in that way because, and this really the reason why I was so low on the Titans offensively before they got D-Hop was because Treylon has the tools to, be a great receiver, at least from a physical standpoint. You look at his profile, but when you watch the tape, his route running, his ability to against jam, they're all lackluster. So I wasn't too high on Treylon having a breakout year because his rookie season wasn't good. Where now DeAndre Hopkins comes in, I know people like to view receivers from the lens of fantasy a lot of times. Treylon might not get as many targets, but this now takes more defensive pressure and focus off of him. Sure. And that's where I think it opens up the offense for him and also somebody in Shige. I think a sleeper in this offense is Tajay Spears, the backup running back behind Derrick Henry. In college, he was phenomenal. He has a lot of wiggle and burst. And Derrick Henry, who's getting older, I don't think the philosophy is 30 carries a game with Derrick Henry. I think Derrick Henry is going to regress this upcoming season. He still might have 1,000 yards, but it's going to look much different than it's looked in years previous.
The only reason I have a little bit of pushback on that statement alone is for the sole fact of now that DeAndre Hopkins on the squad, like I mentioned earlier in my monologue, he's not going to be facing the same. They're not going to be stacking 8 against him. You can't. It's impossible. DeAndre Hopkins will kill you outside. I'll also say this: Derrick Henry is not a normal running back. And the first name that comes to mind that I think about later in their career that they still were able to be dominant, well, let me say 2. One more obvious, one a little bit more low-key. The obvious name is Adrian Peterson, right? That's the gold standard for running back. But when you mention Derrick Henry, you need to start accumulating his name with the other greats. He's an all-time great running back, all-time great player in the NFL. And I say that because AP was one of the few in recent memory that was able to keep that longevity. Another name more under the radar that obviously people still know the name, New York legend, Tiki Barber. Dude was 31 years old, still being a dominant running back, one of the best running backs at the position, still accumulating an insane amount of carries, still being able to be effective. So I look at Derrick Henry, someone who still has that physicality, that strong capability to continue to take a strong workload, but also at the same time, now with DeAndre Hopkins, it becomes a little bit more easy for him, I think, in my opinion.
It does. I think you do see less stacked boxes, but if your concern is about the offensive line, I think that those holes will be few and far between for Derrick Henry anyway. And I don't think he has the same physicality as he had 2 years ago. And there's a reason why the yards per carry has been diminishing. I just think the data overwhelmingly backs up that at 29,
it does. Honestly, it might be a little younger. It might be like 27, 28. But Derrick Henry has gone to a point for me that I got to see it before I predict it.
That's my thought process.
I get it too because you literally see like the age apex at 20. It might even be might be less than 29, but it falls off an insane cliff once you get to that age 27, 28 season. Derrick Henry is just such an outlier.
This year,
Derrick Henry is just such an outlier. That's like
49 attempts.
Yeah, especially the carry. How many carries have the year prior? Do you have 300 plus?
219 because he was
He
hurt.
got hurt.
Oh, right.
The year before that, though, 378,
Yeah.
2,000.
And I think the reason why there's a
It's
narrative around
He's a code, bro.
the Jaguars being a team that has the stranglehold over the division is because they have the better quarterback and offensive coach in Doug Peterson.
And Calvin Ridley's making people think that this offense is going to be all
I think Calvin Ridley's going to be a Pro Bowler this year.
Pro Bowler.
Yeah, I think he's
That's a
going
lot
to be
of
Pro Bowler.
It doesn't hold much weight to me. However, I understand what you mean by that. He's going to have a really good year.
How many receivers
why I
make
say
the
that.
Pro Bowl? 6 on each side?
6. No,
sounds right. I don't know.
Yeah,
A
sounds
Pro
right.
Bowler for a receiver, I think.
I'm gonna be
Calvin
honest with you, bro.
Ridley.
I don't care about the.
Yeah.
Well, I'm assuming
really
he's
don't.
saying he'll have like a top 7.
No, but that's
8.
what you, I understand the sentiment.
That's
So
what I
what's
What's the stat line?
Ridley's going to have over 1,200 yards this year.
Oh, so it's
Over
Smitty.
1,200 yards. He's going to be.
I'll guarantee over 1,000. I'll guarantee.
I can guarantee over 1,200.
Here's the thing. He's more of a touchdown guy, in my opinion, because even before he blew up for was it 1,300 yards that year that he
The year
was
before
alongside?
he got suspended.
Correct. Before that, he had 8 touchdowns, 7 touchdowns. He had a 10 touchdown season without breaking a rack.
1,300.
He's a touchdown guy.
He's a TD merchant.
So I feel more confident
Opposite
that.
of Julio.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, which
10
is kind of
touchdowns, 7, 9, and then 2.
So I bodied that.
You did.
Thanks. Yeah, dude. I mean, in terms of getting to the end zone, Calvin really is like that. So I could see that 8 touchdown type of season. But the yards, Christian Kirk, he's going to be playing against number 2s, and I think that's where he's going to thrive.
Yeah,
he's very comfortably better than him. But I say that as Christian Kirk last season really didn't play like we had seen him for a majority of the season against the wide receiver ones because he's just the cornerback ones because that's just not who he is. Calvin Ridley would now take that attention. The field will open up for a little bit more for Christian Kirk, and I just think a second year in the offense, I think that Christian Kirk, we're just not going to forget about him. I think Christian Kirk's still going to be. I wouldn't be shocked if Christian Kirk's the leading receiver on this team in terms of yards. I think very easily Calvin Ridley's the best player in terms of talent-wise. But again, year 2 in his system.
I'd be surprised.
Dude, Christian Kirk
Kirk's
put up
not-
some
he's not
crazy numbers
facing-
last year.
Ridley's more talented.
He's
I
not
think the
facing
talent
number
just
one
doesn't
quarterback.
work out,
But
know?
he just missed
It
almost
hurts.
2
It does.
seasons.
It could take some time.
Listen,
to get going.
listen, I'll
Rust
tip
on-
my cap. I'll happily say that I'm wrong if Calvin Ridley comes out in just 1,300 yards after missing 2 years.